What's up, everybody? Spencer here from the editing room. And just a little bit of a warning, my internet was going a little crazy this episode, so some things are glitching out a little bit, but it seemed to even out about halfway through the episode. So from the halfway point, it shouldn't be that bad. I apologize. I'll be moving to somewhere with better Wi-Fi here very soon. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the episode. This was an episode that was a ton of fun to record with all these amazing authors. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, joined by a bunch of authors who all had a short story published in the Skybreaker Tales of the Wanderer anthology. We'll introduce them and their books one by one in just a moment. But first, please consider taking a crowbar to those like and subscribe buttons down below, like they owe you money. And make sure you hit the little bell icon while you're at it to get notified whenever we put up new content. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy if you like fantasy book recommendations, midnight meanderings and rantings, and the occasional dog pick. With all that out of the way, let's introduce our guests and the books that they have written, starting with Holly.
I'm Holly Tinsley and I wrote the Vanguard Chronicles. Book one, We Men of Ash and Shadow, has been out for a while and was in last year's SPFBO. And the follow-up to that, The Hand That Cast the Bone, was released last April. Those are the first two books in the series. The third is currently being worked on now. And if anybody wants to find out more or follow me, I'm on Twitter under @HollyTinsley, and the E is a 3.
Hi, I'm David Green. I am the author of the Empire of Ruin series, which is, we have 2 books out of 4 out at the moment. There's In Solitude Shadow, that came out last year, and then the second one, Path of War, that came out 2 days ago. So that was quite a recent one. And the best place to find me is my website, which is davidgreenwriter.com.
Hi, I'm C Conley. I'm the author of The Dead Sagas, which is like a zombie apocalypse medieval thing. It's quite crazy. There's 2 books in the series at the moment. There's Ritual of Bone, and then there's a Ritual of Flesh. And I'm currently working on the third one, Ritual of Blood. And the best place to find me again is my website. So it's leeconleyauthor.com, or if you go on Twitter, it's Longsword Lee is my handle on there, or anywhere really. Just type Lee Conley in on social media, and I'm fairly easy to find usually. So.
I'm Derek Power, so I am the author of the Filthy Henry comedy fantasy series. There's currently 4 books, and I'm working on the 5th one at the moment, so that kind of takes up a lot of my time. I'm really bad at the social media, so the only place you're going to find me is on Twitter at DCPower_writer, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, nice. Thanks, Derek. I'm Damien Larkin. I'm the author of military science fiction books Big Red and Blood Red Sand. That's all I got. I've been working on a few more books at the minute, but nothing official yet. If you're looking to find out more, I'm on Instagram more than anything. You'll find me at Damo_Danger_Larkin. So yeah, take a crowbar to that subscribe button.
And I'm Jenny Hannaford. I'm the author of The Black Hind's Wake duology. Skin was out last October, and The Pact is due out on the 1st of September. You can find me at jhanaford.com.
Sweet. Awesome. So all of you guys, I'm sure we're missing a couple people, right? But all of you guys have been in the Skybreaker Tales of the Wanderer, right? So do any of you guys kind of want to tell us what in general that anthology is about? Is there a theme that is kind of going throughout the whole thing that ties your stories together?
It was primarily the Wanderer. The whole concept behind it, I think, was David, Derek, and Chris kind of gathered us all together. I think we all kind of know each other from different cons and just from interacting online. But it was the likes of the three lads who kind of pulled us all together and said, right, how about we actually sit down and write an anthology? So we just pretty much threw out as many ideas as you could. Some of them kind of stuck to the wall. The one thing that kind of binded it all was the concept of the Wanderer, who's this mythical creature who is basically trying to escape imprisonment, and kind of shows up in different variations throughout the stories. So I'd say that's the one kind of glue that holds them all together.
Okay, so he's kind of, I read the first story in the book, and I saw the kind of prologue thing with the Wanderer. So he's opening portals all across the place, right? Does he show up in all of your guys' stories?
Yeah, so pretty much.
Yeah, it's not so much that he's opening up the portals, it's that a portal was opened up to imprison him. And
okay.
The people that did it, they didn't understand the magics of portals. And then all these other little portals appear in all of our stories. Then that's how the Wanderer is able to go from effectively genre to genre, because these portals have opened up all over the place.
Okay, cool.
Isn't it more in some stories and less in others? Like some might have just like a reference to him, or might be a line or so, and others he's in it, or they, I suppose, because they can take on many different forms, are in it quite a bit. So it's dependent. We were kind of just wanted everyone just to be kind of comfortable with what they wanted to write and not really impose any kind of rules on it, and just be like, if you want to use this, then use it, and if you don't want to use it, then that's fine as well. Just go and write what you want to write.
Oh, cool. So just to give them a shout out real quick, who were the other authors that were in this anthology that weren't able to make it today?
Was it Chris, wasn't
it? Yes, so we're missing Chris Holtman and
CF Wellburn
as well. Yeah, he couldn't make it today. And then I think, is that all of us? I can't remember how many of us there are now.
We best not miss someone out. We best not miss someone out. Wait, I'm trying to think. Have we got everyone?
We really miss one of those authors.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you guys want to kind of go through and talk about what your short story is in the anthology?
Should we do the same order as we did the intros?
Sure.
Is
yeah. That works.
Remember Derek? Signal.
Okay, so my story in the anthology is called Something Wondrous. I would say that mine is one of the ones where the actual character of the Wanderer isn't really massively prevalent. So mine's one of those ones that David mentioned where it's more kind of in the background mentioned. So mine is set in a prison where like weird, mystical, magical things start happening, and obviously it has like very negative effects. So there's a lot of kind of horror elements to it, and a lot of kind of paranormal, supernatural things going on. So, and my story is about one of the inmates in the prison and how he reacts and how he tries to get away from all this kind of crazy stuff that is going on.
Cool. Yeah, I so I jumped ahead a little bit just to see what your story was, and I got through the first chapter or so, and I just want to say that beginning is horrifying. the thing that happens to that poor guy, I was like, it was described as like an accordion, and I was like, oh my God. I don't want to. Can I? Would it be spoiler if I said what it was?
I mean, I don't know. Would it like? I don't know if it'd be a spoiler or not.
Okay.
Like, I think people need to just read it. But I didn't think it was that horrible. Like, I thought mine was on the milder end compared to some of the other guys' stories.
Oh, well, that's what Crystal Matar said about her book too. She's like, I didn't think it was that dark, and everyone's like, this is a super dark book. All right, David.
Yeah, so mine is called Bring Down the Sky. It's kind of quite similar in tone to Holly's actually. It's kind of low fantasy enough. I And it actually surprised me quite a lot when I was writing it, because I started going into a direction that I hadn't planned for, and I was like, I'm just going to roll with it and just see what happens with this. So mine was kind of started out. Mine is one of the ones that the Wanderer is in it quite a lot, because I quite liked the character that we came up with, so I wanted to use the Wanderer as much as I could. But I also came up with a character called Eladin, who is like kind of like your classic kind of rogue character when you kind of first meet him, but he's it goes a little bit deeper than that, I suppose. You kind of get a real kind of look about this guy who's quite haunted about things that he's done in his past, and he's kind of looking for like one last job so he doesn't have to do his job anymore, which is usually done as like an assassin or a thief or something like that. And yeah, it's kind of quite introspective, and there's quite most people that have read it and kind of left a review have kind of said, can't really talk about this one because there's a big twist in it. So so yeah, I can't really say anything else really, because everything else in it is kind of a spoiler, I guess.
For sure. I guess the question I should also add to this whole thing is, does your short story in the anthology tie into a larger series that you're writing?
Yeah, no, not at all. No, it's I mean, I would like to go back and use this character again because I really enjoyed writing him, but no, it's nothing to do with any of my other series, and it's quite different in style tone to what I usually would write as well, which is one of the fun things about doing an anthology, is just to do something a little bit different.
Right. Holly, did you want to answer the question on if it ties into a larger series? Or
Mine actually does. I actually started working on a full-length novel probably about 5 months ago with this main character, and it's the same main character that's in my short story. It's still the same kind of time setting and kind of aesthetic, but it's not in the same world as the Wanderer, so it will be a completely separate story, but it will have the same kind of vibe, same characters, that sort of thing.
Nice. All right, Lee.
Okay, so my story is called Stormchild, which is the name of a ship. So I normally write sort of say Dark Age zombie horror, basically, but this time I went for sort of a maritime monster story. So it's kind of like, have I been pitching it to people? It's kind of like Master and Commander, is in the sense of like the character, but it's also kind of like Moby Dick because he's very driven by vengeance. And then instead of a whale, he's hunting this giant, great, big, crazy sea monster thing. And they're just flying around in this boat, shooting cannons at sea monsters and things. And yeah, it's quite cool. I enjoyed writing it. It was good fun. The Wanderer is in it. He plays a role. So he's not necessarily malicious or helpful. He's just kind of like knowing, and yeah, he has his agenda, but I wanted to keep it quite open. And there's lots of portals. There's lots of portals, and the rift's in the sky above. Obviously, the guys, and they navigate by the stars and things like that. So there's this big rift in the sky, and there's loads of portals opening up all over the place with mad monsters and things from other stories popping out and disappearing again. And yeah, it's great. It's fun. I really enjoyed it. It's good collaborating with everyone to get it to all fit together. So.
Cool.
Awesome.
And does it fit? Did you already say does it fit into a larger series at all?
Well, no, it doesn't. I mean, my main series of novels is One World, and then all my short stories that I've done like over the last couple of years, they've all been separate, standalone little stories. So I generally don't write in like a single world. I like to go off and to do something else, explore a short little thing, and then I might go back to some of them in the future, maybe. But it's nice to just get away from the main series and just do something different. So that's where I do my short stories every time, pretty much.
Cool.
So my one is called Topher the World, and it basically takes place at the peak of a mountain where people would go to commune with their local deity and seek out wisdom and guidance and stuff. The darkness that the other stories have, because I'm in the middle-ish. So we set you up for the darkness, then you get to my one, and then it gets more dark as we go on. So, and the whole thing is, I've mainly done comedy, so I didn't really stretch my muscles too much. I kept with the comedic vein of it, on how Topher and Erom interact. the Wanderer does pop up into my one as well a bit, as a character that they engage with. So you kind of learn a little bit of stuff of what's going on there from backstory and stuff like that. And then to answer your question before you have to go and ask it, is it part of another? It's not, but it possibly is going to be. I've had a couple of people tell me that they'd like to see more adventures with Topher and Niram. So I kind of done up a skeleton for a book that I might do after the next Filthy Henry one, and see how I can flesh it out into a full-fledged novel with the two of them.
Okay, cool.
Oh yeah, that's me. Yeah, so my one is The Righteous Old Guard. It's a military fantasy style story. Basically follows a bunch of elderly religious zealots as they hunt and destroy their own community, in all blinded by their kind of ambition to destroy the Wanderer, who they perceive as like a force of evil, who's distracting people from doing their holy tasks and their chores and stuff. Instead, they're kind of cavorting in fields and having a whale of a time, basically. I think one of the things that kind of struck me about it was the kind of the extremism that you see kind of in modern events, where you're, quote unquote, what they call the culture wars, where you've one group of people hating another group of people, and there's no kind of in between, there's no divide or anything. So I suppose in my head I kind of said, right, well, what would happen in this fantasy style setting where there is no kind of barriers, where people can literally take up swords and weapons to take out their kind of anger and their frustration on people who really don't deserve it. So I kind of, like, if you had a bunch of elderly people entrenched in their views, or kind of seeing the social change in this fantasy setting, and what would they do to basically resolve it for what they think that the right thing to do is. And to answer the follow-up question, no, it's not set in anything I'm working on now at the minute. I think I'm a little bit the odd kind of person out in the sense that everyone else here primarily kind of writes fantasy, whereas I'm more kind of science fiction. I haven't actually written a fantasy novel in about 4 years. Hoping to soon enough, but yeah, I don't have any plans to branch off with this story. I would like to do a sequel to it, like set maybe 30 years after the events, and kind of dealing with the aftermath of what.
It's anywhere near as dark as some of the others, but it's not comedic either, I suppose. The Wanderer in mine is probably the most different out of all of them in some respects, because we agreed early on that the Wanderer could take different shapes and forms, not just that of a humanoid. And we also agreed that they could be, all of these could be set in different times. So mine is actually very much a tribal culture with hog riders and whale riders, and it's set in the ice. And the Wanderer is known as a different name in mine, is seen as their kind of god. They were this prophet-y creature. So although the Wanderer has exactly the same key features in mine, so should be identifiable compared to the other stories, it has a slightly different name because it's a slightly different time and place. And it follows one person's journey of kind of quite abject failure from his family's perspective, and what happens to him through his journey with the interaction of the Wanderer.
Okay, cool. So, you mentioned that your Wanderer has similar features to the ones in other stories. Did you guys kind of have to work together to make sure that you're getting like a cohesive thing across the whole book, or what was it like working with each other and trying to find a common theme and stuff?
I mean, I think the main thing and I think these guys will all agree, is that very early on we set a theme and we said, okay, these are going to be the common things throughout each story, so we're going to have particular traits and physical features that we can call upon. And then about a week later we all forgot what we'd said, and then there was like 6 months of us just chatting on Messenger going, what colour were the eyes again, what was this? So we started off really well and it just went downhill from there.
That's cool. Let's see. Gabe, do you want to take this next one?
I cannot scroll up right now, so I have no idea where you're at.
Oh wow, is your computer
it's
going haywire?
It's pretty much bricked right now. The video's still working, so I'm afraid to touch it or anything. Yeah, dude.
All right, we'll just keep trucking along.
Yeah.
Let's see. And sorry, guys, I don't know if I'm freezing up on you guys, but there was a couple times where my internet went a little weird. So is it, and a couple of you guys kind of already answered this a little bit, I think, but is it harder to write a fully fleshed out story in short story format, or do you find more whatever you want to call it, like fulfillment or joy or whatever in writing a longer story? Or what's that like, trying to make a short story that is not only cohesive with everyone else's, but also makes sense in world where you only have what would probably be like 2 or 3 chapters in a normal fantasy book?
I think a short story is actually harder to get everything in. So you've got to like you can't do like extensive world building, but you've still got to put it in a world that is recognizable. So it's got to be done sort of in media res, so in the middle of the action.
Right.
But like sometimes a short story can be quite quick and quite easy, but other times it can actually be really hard getting everything in there, executing the plot properly and having character development that doesn't build over a long time. I mean, in a novel, you can go on for ages and ages and slowly build things up and slowly put in bits and bobs here and that. But with a short story, it's got to be, it's distilled, it's all distilled down. So it can be quite tricky, but they're loads shorter to do. They're short stories, so you can do it in a week. But yeah, I mean, when I was learning to write, we used to do a lot of exercises where it would be like, write this, you've only got a very small word count, you've got to make it good. And it really, really helps, like, refine your skills. Then when you go to write a novel, you can make your novel super huge because you're good at distilling everything down.
Right.
That's just the way I look at it, though. Anyway.
Yeah, you kind of have to like pick your battles a little bit, where it's like, you might have a load of different ideas, but like Lee said, you've only got a certain amount of word count, so you can't, you might be like, I'd like to do this, but it's not really that important to what story I'm trying to tell. And you have to kind of come up with like a lot of shorthand to kind of get across what your character is like. So, like for example, in my chapter in this, it's not a spoiler or anything, but very early on, there's a sickness that's going around the land that this person lives in, and he comes across someone who is basically dying in the gutter and helps him on his way, but then he also takes his money from him because he's like, well, he's dead now, so he doesn't need this money anymore, right? So that kind of shows what this character is like, and it's a little bit on the nose, but it's kind of what you have to do in short stories to kind of say, well, this is how this character sees the world and how they interact. Where if it was in a novel, you could probably do the same thing over a chapter or two and do it in a kind of different kind of way. So you just have to kind of get to the point a lot quicker with a short story, but they are fun to do. It's a great exercise. I really like doing short stories. I don't get to do them as much as I used to, but there is something there's something brilliant about like a 5, 6, 7, 8,000 word story that's really well told.
Yeah, I tend to find they work as almost palate cleansers. When I'm struggling with something else, sometimes I will just crank out a short story. This one, I think because we knew it had to tie in, I felt like I had to have a little bit of this is what's got to happen. And just like David said, you've got to present that world building very quickly, but organically. It's so like that stabbing incident and stealing incident in his, and the father's disappointment because I failed 6 times kind of thing in mine. You don't have time to show it. Sometimes you've just got to bite the bullet and tell it. I think sometimes short stories break some of those kind of, you can't build all the rest quite the same way. And you got to trust when it's done as well, I think. Mine is the shortest in the anthology by a few thousand words, and the temptation to flesh it out to match everyone else's was there, but it's kind of like, no, it's done. I could make it bigger, but no, that's it. Take your hands off, send it away now.
Yeah, I can see how that would be difficult if if you're writing this short story and you have a world that you like being in while you're writing it, and wanting.
I could have happily carried on.
Yeah, exactly. Who wrote the first story in the book? The one about the swamp?
Oh, CF.
Oh, that's very cool.
CF. Okay. Yeah, that one, I think they did a really good job of kind of giving you this environment and giving you like this social structure and giving you a problem and just kind of leaving it at that. We don't know what's outside the swamp. We don't know like all these other details that I would love to know, but I can only speak to that one because that's the only one I've had experience with so far. But I just think that that was a perfect way to kind of take this story that could have gone on for much longer and kind of distilled it down.
And Craig is an absolute CF Wellburn. He's a fantastic writer. His prose is spot on.
Yeah.
But you've got to bear in mind though, but when we all went away and wrote them at the same time. So we weren't like allocated, you do the first one, you do the second one. And we just wrote them all. And then we read them through and then arranged them, in a way, like when you're making a mixtape, if people still have tapes, mix CD, I'll show my age there. But,
Spotify playlist would have got us.
What's a Spotify playlist? But of course I know. But yeah, so we just sort of arranged them by feel, and so they build up in a certain way. And I believe it was Derek who did the prologue and the outro, the epilogue, which I was supposed to help you with, but I ended up being snowed under busy. So Derek just powered through and smashed it.
And as you were saying, Spencer, about like, you're in this kind of swamp and you're not sure what's outside it. That really what his work is quite a lot about. It's like it's very kind of tight focus on a character, and when you're reading it, it kind of reveals bits and as you're going along in a really great way. So his style is if you enjoyed that chapter, then you'd really kind of get a good taste for how he writes and what his work is about.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check out the rest of that work or the rest of his work, because I definitely enjoyed that bit quite a lot. All right, like I said earlier, guys, sorry, my internet is kind of going weird, so sorry if I froze up here and there or missed some in between stuff. I guess the last question I have for this, unless you guys have anything else specifically you'd like to talk about regarding Skybreaker, is there an audiobook coming soon? Do you guys know anything about any audiobook plans?
I don't believe there's one at the minute, is there? There's no plans for one. Unless you guys are going to do one, but I didn't think there was going to be.
Yeah, there has been discussions for it, but it's, these things take time.
Yeah,
but
say no.
No, but it's something that we would like to do. It's a tricky one to do, because obviously it's one of those things where it's like, would you have the same person doing all of it?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And would you get different voices for it? And obviously that increases the cost and whatever. Obviously there's different ways of doing audiobooks these days. But yeah, it is something that we would like to do. And I think some of the stories in particular lend themselves really well to audio, to be audio books, I think. So yeah, maybe watch this space.
Okay, cool. For sure. All right, well, I guess we'll just get on to some general writing questions and just kind of hang out and talk about whatever kind of writing stuff you guys would like to. I'd like to start it off with how we usually start out our podcast, with, have you guys been reading anything good lately? I know it takes, a lot of authors don't get to read as much as the times when they're not writing. So I know it can be difficult to find a book to pick up when you're in the middle of it. But have you guys been able to read anything good lately? Or if you haven't, watched anything good on TV, etc.?
Do you know, I'm reading the Prince of Nothing trilogy by I got his name right, R. Scott Bakker, which is one of those series, isn't it? It's pretty mega. It's awesome. Watching The Boys, that's cool.
Oh, I haven't gotten into the
I
new
need
season.
I need to watch
I've only just started
the new one yet either.
I've only just started it. Literally just season 1. I'm just like, wow, this is actually awesome. How have I not watched
Oh,
it?
nice.
But
Yeah,
see,
deadly.
whereas I always get to read and I always write, but I don't actually really watch television at all. Maybe like, I don't know, I watch like an hour a week, maybe tops. So I miss loads of stuff. Everyone's like, have you seen this on Netflix? I'm like, yeah, I don't. So I do read though, an awful lot. And that's how you balance it out. You got to give, something's got to give, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have a confession to make, Lee. The Prince of Nothing series is the only series I have not finished when I've started reading it.
Do you know,
And I've tried.
I can see it's very thick, isn't it? The
It's
prose is
not.
very
It's not.
thick.
Yeah, it's not even that. It's just I get to the same point. I get to the third book every single time. I've tried multiple times. I can't. I just keep going back to
Oh,
it.
I'm not there yet. I'm only on book 1 still, but it's awesome
All right.
so
Okay.
far.
Yeah. The thing is with it, I hate every single character in the book. and I get to this point where I kind of like I keep forcing my phrase, but I get to this point where I'm just like the only one that I kind of find likable in the slightest. I just end up disliking, and I'm done. And like, if they just invented a nuclear bomb in this world and just let it drop on all of the characters, I'd be like, you know what? Didn't like it, but the ending was worth it.
Yeah.
But I know what people really love it. I just can't. Like my best mate loves it, and he's always like, "Have you not finished this series yet?" And I'm just, I can't do it. I've tried so many times.
I found it really hard to get into. It's quite like heavy going, you know, and thick. The prose is very thick. But then when you get about halfway, you're like, actually, this is awesome. And like all the threads start to come together, and we'll see. We'll see if I get. I mean, I'll probably take me till the rest of the year reading the whole series. It's huge.
Yeah, no, there is a lot. I mean, it is really well written and everything. And like, I think it does pose like a lot of. It's kind of like a more, even if this is possible, it's like a more philosophical version of the Malazan books, if that's possible, right? I hate all of them.
More philosophical than the Malazan books. That's saying something.
Right, yeah. Well, I've been reading. I was able to read. I've been beta reading a new book that's coming out from one of my favorite authors, which is it's an urban fantasy one called Jinxed. It's the second book in called the Gilded Blood series. So I finished that just a few days ago, and it's excellent. It's really, really great.
Who's that by, David?
What's that? Rachel Renner. It's by. The first one is called Inked, and it's really great. And the second one's even better. So I was really kind of lucky to get an early look.
I'll have to check that out. I love urban fantasy like Dresden Files and stuff. So definitely have to give that a read. It's funny, David, the way you talk about the Prince of Nothing series is exactly how I feel about the First Law trilogy. And I know that's going to make people go, what? But I there's something about the blade itself that I've tried 3 times now, and I've gotten about 65 to 70% of the way through the book each time. And and funny enough, like I hate all the characters, but Giselle, who is usually the character that everybody else hates, is the only one I like. And I've tried so many times.
Yeah, you're not alone. I'm the exact same. I've tried to read it a few times because everyone is just always banging on about it. And obviously, there's so many fantastic reviews. Something about it, as soon as I get past the halfway point, my attention goes.
Yeah.
Which is really, really strange. I can't put my finger on it, and have tried multiple times, and I'm missing out. I just have to power through one day.
I'm so glad there's somebody that agrees with me, because I'm usually on an island by myself with that opinion.
You're not alone anymore.
But there's definitely no doubting that Joe Abercrombie is a really fantastic author. Like I really loved his prose and everything, but it was just like the story itself. Well, the first book really doesn't really have a story, but the characters mostly, I just couldn't. I was like, I just don't like any of these.
I'm reading Path of War. I don't know where he is compared to me on your screen. I'm about a third of the way through, and I said before I started it that there was one particular character I was desperate to see reappear in book 2. And they're there, and now I'm happy. And I was like, yes. So I am working my way through that at the moment. So, and I've recently also read Inked, so the first one of the ones that David was talking about. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well. That was a kind of sit down in one night and read job. So not because it's thin, just because it was good and it just kind of pulled you through. And yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well. So Yeah, I have a massive list of books I want to read this summer. I'm planning on hitting them in about a week's time, probably less. And then I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to be starting to read because I have so many books. Holly's is on my Kindle waiting to be read. I just, yeah.
Yeah, likewise. David, I've got yours. I need to read it. Jenny, I've got your new one. I need to read that. Holly, I've got yours. I need to read that as well. You guys need to write more books so I can put it on my list of books to read.
Yeah, not books to read, just books to go on the list.
Yeah, that's what we do. It's like, we get people saying, "You're on my TBR list." It's like, great. That's all we need.
Yeah. Gabe, we'll have to check out this urban fantasy book. You got 2 recommendations here so far.
It's quite steamy. It is quite.
Is it?
Okay.
Yeah. It's not your usual.
I'm not gonna lie, it was more steamy than I expected when I started reading it. I was like, okay, all right.
It's not your usual urban fantasy. No. I have an urban fantasy series as well, and it's very like more traditionally urban fantasy. But this one is quite unique, and the magic system is.
Oh, it's clever.
Yeah, it's very clever. The magic system. It's all to do with blood types and all this kind of stuff. And
oh wow,
yeah, it's really interesting. And it's Jewish urban fantasy as well. Like the author is Jewish, and all the characters in it are Jewish as well. So it's very unique.
Cool.
Nice. Holly, have you been reading anything lately?
No, I was hoping you would skip over me for this question. I've let the team down. I mean, to be fair, I've this last month I've had COVID. My family's had it. We're in the middle of a heat wave. My brain literally can't remember what books are. Never mind these at this point. But I've been watching The Boys, so I'm up to date on that. I'm watching the new series at the moment. I've watched everything up to the point that it's been released, and oh my god, that's one of those shows where you think they can't hit a new level of insanity, and they just see it as a challenge and just hit it. So yeah, that's really good. I'm enjoying that. I'm doing a rewatch of Arcane as well at the moment, so I don't know if anyone else watched that, but probably the best animated series that I think has been out probably like the last kind of 5 years for me.
I've been trying to get Gabe to watch Arcane because I know if he did, he would love it.
Yeah, no, I know. And literally every person that's told me that has said the same thing. Like, dude, just watch an episode. That's all it's gonna take.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the Boys is, keeping up to their standard that they've held in place so far. I was really hoping that the 3rd season, like I was hoping the 3rd season wouldn't be like, oh, it was a huge disappointment compared to season 2, but it sounds like everyone is really enjoying it, I think.
I think it's one of those weird shows where I think you get to a point where you don't actually know if you're enjoying it anymore. You're still watching it.
That's awesome.
True. That's true. All right. Derek, have you said what you're reading or watching or anything?
I've just finished, I was a bit slow to the game, Latvian Falls, the last Expanse book. And I kind of read it just to finish the series.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a meh ending.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You just broke Spencer's heart.
Yeah.
I had the same problem though with the Game of Thrones. I can't remember a Song of Ice and Fire. Like they started out great and they were touted as being trilogies, and I was like, yes, trilogies are back. You just want 3 books and you're done.
Right.
And then they just kept going and going, and The Expanse had the same problem. I think it started off great, and then but it wraps up the plot lines nicely, and it felt like they probably could have finished the 2 books before and still had the same impact that they had. And then from one of my watching perspective, I have a guilty pleasure around Westworld, so that started back up. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but
is it good?
The opening episode was very good. I haven't had a chance to watch the last one, and I know there's one tonight now as well, so the kids are going to get a few drops of cough syrup and
old school. Yeah,
I'll sit down and watch that.
Oh, I love Westworld. Even the most recent seasons, I really loved those.
Yeah, it's so good, so good. Just down to demo now.
Oh, me? Right, okay. Yeah, I've been doing like a lot of beta and arc reads over the last while. I'd say probably one writer was on my radar. I should have been across a lot for a lot longer. Frank Dorian, he came out with a book, Tales of the Hunter. I think it was earlier this year, or could have been late last year. But apparently he's been very active in the UK indie writing scene for a while. I kind of interacted with him through some of the online groups that we have, and he just sent me on an arc read. It was probably one of the most explosive kind of reads I've had in a while. Dark fantasy style story, very Celtic inspired, but I think the language and the prose was just stunning. It was just absolutely beautifully written, very well executed, and on top of that, he's doing a lot of short stories through his newsletter, or through his emails. So he's releasing, I think, a new short story, not interconnected or anything, all just different kind of types of fantasy. I think it's every 4 weeks or something, but I've read 4 of them already, and they're just absolute masterpieces. So it's clearly someone I should have read a lot more of, and I plan to go and read some of his older stuff as well. But I definitely recommend it if you're into well-written books and with plenty of violence and kind of twists and solid characters. And 100%, I'd say check him out.
Frank
probably,
is awesome.
Oh yes, he's absolutely brilliant. So
And he's hilarious. He's a hilarious guy as well.
Great fella. Really nice. I suppose the other one on my radar would be Jessa Forrest. She's again fantastic indie author. She wrote one of my favorite books of last year called Pulling Teeth and Other Stories, which was a dark fantasy story dealing with werewolves and this evil organization that hunts them down. I had the pleasure of beta reading the sequel to that book, which I think is coming out now in the next couple of weeks, and it's absolutely amazing. So she's definitely someone to look out for. She's going to go far.
Nice. Well, Gabe, I'd love to get you involved a little bit. What have you been reading?
So I've been kind of on this rereadathon, I guess you could say, and it started with KDT. We went through King's Dark Tidings again, which is just always so good to go back to. And I also read, I still need to read the last one, but like the Jade trilogy, Jade Legacy, Jade War, those ones, which is super good. We finished Locklands, which is the 3rd book of the Founders trilogy. Yeah. And that was a pretty wild ride. Have any of you guys ever read that or heard of it?
No, I haven't heard of it. Well, what's it about?
Starting with like Foundry side, I think is the first one.
Yeah, so it's a lot to unpack, man. I don't even know if I could do it justice.
So the basic description is the first book is about a thief who basically finds a sentient key. And so this key can unlock anything basically. And really where the whole series shines is in the magic system, similar to how like Mistborn is really good because of the magic system. It's kind of the same for this trilogy. And basically the magic system works by they have these items that they scribe runes onto, and depending on the combination of runes, they can convince an object to do certain things. So they can, if they scribe it right, they can convince a basic cart that the wheels are supposed to, when it's on flat ground, the wheels are supposed to feel as if it's going downhill, meaning that it just moves forwards. They can make these objects do all sorts of things, including disobey gravity and all sorts of cool stuff. And each book gets progressively more and more complicated with that magic system, not in the way that the reader doesn't understand it, but these building blocks are set in place, and then there's just more and more and more. And by the time you get to the 3rd book, it's basically like cyberpunk. Like it goes, like the magic system just grows and grows and grows until you're basically in like a sci-fi book by the end of it.
So it's crazy good.
Yeah.
Yes. It is super wild. And the 3rd book was probably my least favorite for the most part of the book. The ending was incredible, but it was just a little slower than we thought.
Yeah.
less of a conclusion, I guess you could say, but it was still good.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I read it.
Yeah, I have the weirdest take on that. I'm like, I didn't really like the third book, but the epilogue was perfect. It was a perfect epilogue, and I cried, and like,
Yeah.
but the rest of the book was like, it's all right.
Yeah.
As far
And
as
then,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's something that we both read, and you can talk about it. But the novella short story that Jim Butcher wrote in the Dresden Files world.
Yeah.
So that was just so good to have another Dresden Files book come in. Mind you, it's pretty, it was pretty short. At my reading speed, it was like an hour and 15 minutes, but I like the story. We got a little bit of kind of what happened after Battlegrounds, just in the world building and, how things, I guess, have devolved or kind of turned out after that. But then the storyline in itself, it was kind of a separate story, and it was really good too. And then also Jim Butcher narrated it, which I thought was pretty cool. At first I was like, I don't know if I'll like this. It's not Marsters, but I was like, he did a good job.
Are any of you guys Dresden Files fans?
I'm up to speed on that at the minute.
Well, yeah, I am now. I was aware of it when I first started writing my urban fantasy book, and I was aware of the fact that Harry Dresden was a wizard, so I was like, I'm not going to make my character a wizard because it's too similar. So I wrote the first one. It was only like a little one-shot novelette at the time, which I've kind of folded into the first proper book of the series. So it's like the first one is like kind of the first two stories. So when I finished the first one, I went, you know what, I'm going to treat myself and read the Dresden Files. And I read Stormfront, and I was like, you know what, this is quite similar to what I've just written. And I'm really worried about the next book in this series in case it's going to do. But then when I read like the next couple of Dresden books, I was like, it's different from what I'm doing, like quite fundamentally different. There is trappings there which are unavoidable, but I didn't really mind so much because a lot of people then that were kind of reading this series were like saying this is like the Dresden Files and Supernatural mixed together, and I was like, that's fine, that's a great way to kind of explain. People hadn't watched Supernatural at that point either, and I was like, I should watch Supernatural because everyone keeps that, and I was like, yeah, I can see why people would say this. I do. I'm not I'm not caught up with Dresden yet. I am opposite. I'm just about actually Changes is my next one, which I know.
Oh, that's going to be the best one.
Yeah,
I'm sure everybody's told you that.
Yeah. Apparently it does what it says on the tin.
Very true.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of something. Like you were saying, you were worried you hadn't read it, and then you read something else, and you're like worried that it was going to be similar, right? I've never read Wheel of Time. Okay. I've read his Conan stuff. I'm just looking up on the shelf there. But I've never read Wheel of Time, right? So I came up with a mountain range in my series, the Spine of the World, right? It's a giant mountain range going down the middle of the world. Great idea. Quality idea. How come none of you fuckers told me that was in Wheel of Time?
No, it's one of those things, right? It's just like there's only so many ideas, isn't there, right? And Robert Jordan, to be fair to him, bless his soul, ripped off a load of stuff himself, so it's fine. Don't worry about it.
I'm just hoping I don't get sued one day, but yeah, it's all good. I thought that was a great idea. That's a quality idea for a mountain range.
It is a great name. Like he has a mountain range called the Mountains of Doom, like spelled with a H, on his net. So you know what, it's funny.
And his Aes Sedai, however you want, Aes Sedai, which actually, if you look at where his spelling comes from, is just ripped from Irish folk tales and respelt. And therefore people say it differently to how it would actually be. If you look at the lettering of the Irish Fae, it's basically the Irish Fae with an extra spelling or two.
Irish names,
but it's just spelt differently.
Irish names, Scandinavian names, and old British folklore names. They're like my go-to for names.
Yeah. He was a great one for taking, especially in the first few books. He just takes off a load of Arthurian legend names and goes, I'm going to just do these a little bit differently. So you have like Rand Alfor, which is like, then you have Egwene Alvear, which is very similar to Gwen.
Yeah.
There's Arthur Pendrag as well, and all these kind of things.
Well, that's a close one. That one.
There's literally a
Isn't that
sword
one
in the
supposed to
stone,
be
so-
because he's replying it to the Age of Legends, and it supposedly is one of the future cycles of this planet? So that's where
Yes,
that.
it is. Yeah. There is, and there's literally a sword in the stone, a sword in the stone as well. Like there's a sword in a place called the Stone that they need to get at some point. So like it's very. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I
Kind
like
of the
doing
one
intentional
try.
nods. I've done loads of intentional nods to like things that I love,
Right.
But yeah, but that one caught me off guard. My dungeon master from D&D was like, "Dude, you totally stole that." I was like, "I didn't. I've never even read it." Yeah. Anyway,
is it hard to when you're coming up with an idea for a book, is it hard to kind of separate what you want to write from things that you've been influenced by? Is it hard for that not to like kind of bleed over? Like if you're a big fan of, a certain video game series or a certain book series, like is it really hard for that not to come through in your writing, or how do you guys handle that?
I say let it bleed. Let it bleed. You know what I mean? Go for it. I mean, the amount of people that told me my series reminds them of Skyrim, or it's like Walking Dead in the Viking setting. I was like, when I wrote down the first concept for that series, it was, I'm going to write Walking Dead, but in Vikings, 2 TV shows, and that's basically what I tried to do. And like, I don't care. Yeah, it's cool. Go with the vibe. I say, if you've got something that's awesome, combine them. Let it bleed. Let your influences show. So, but yeah.
I tend to avoid it. I go cold. I won't read anything else when I'm writing a draft at all. I won't. I might read a couple of things that are related, or I might read factual stuff that would support world building. I mean, I read an entire book that thick on the explorations of the Arctic Passage and the Northwest Passage just to write 2 chapters of the Skin.
Oh wow.
Wow.
But I won't read any fiction whilst that draft is going on. And only when I finished it and I'm done at least the first edit will I pick up another book, which is why I'm saying that next week, when I have finished editing, I am going to read and read and read until I literally am so tired.
I kind of do that as well, actually, Jenny. Like I've never actually read a zombie novel ever. So like I use TV as a big, I don't really watch much, but the few things I do watch, they're my inspirations. So I'll like literally note it down on my list. I've got a TV list of my 1 hour a week that I watch. So like I'll watch like Walking Dead, Vikings, Game of Thrones, the odd thing, the boys, things like that. But like I don't really read anything like what I'm writing at all. So I wanted to put a completely fresh spin on it,
Yeah.
It's like if I'm writing like proper fantasy, I'll read horror. I don't read horror when I'm writing my horror, if you know what I mean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when I started writing the Skin, so many people were like, have you read this? Have you read this? Have you read that? And I'm like, no. And now you've said it, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Thanks for the heads up.
Thanks for the heads up until I'm done, and then maybe I'll read it. Yeah, I will actively avoid at that point, very actively avoid. And I don't watch much television at all.
Oh.
But my husband is binge watching Lucifer.
Oh, yeah.
Great
And
show.
for the first time ever, I have sat down, and people talk about fantasy casting your book all the time. The first time ever, I've sat down and I've watched probably about a third of the episodes with him. And I've turned around and gone, the guy playing Lucifer, he's Sal. He's Sal. Like, yeah, and Lee's nodding.
Yeah, cool. Well, I don't know who the Lucifer guy is, but I know
he's
Sal.
got the edge of Sal. And I'm like, yeah, that for the first time ever. Yes, him.
What about you, Holly? How do you kind of manage your various influences? Do you go on a reading strike while you're writing?
I mean, I'm very similar to Jenny, really, in that when I'm writing or editing, I go on a complete book embargo. I will not read anything. I have done in the past, and I find that just leads to emulation of other people's voices. So I found, particularly when I first started writing, because at that time I was very heavily into Terry Pratchett books, that everything I wrote was like a cut price version of Terry Pratchett, and it was quite frankly not very good. So I find that for me, when I write, I have to completely silence all those other voices. I do draw influence from a lot of TV shows, and particularly from video games as well. I think we've talked in the past about things like Dishonored and Assassin's Creed, things like that. And I actually find as well, when I sit down and I write, the way that I visualize books, it's almost like when you get like the cutscenes for video games where they explain the world and the backstory. So that's kind of how I visualize before I write, which is really handy because it actually works really well for writing in chapters, because I see everything in these kind of small snippet segments. So and yeah, I mean, again, similar to what people were saying earlier as well, I'll write something and it's not until after that I realise that it has any similarities. So obviously I get Peaky Blinders is like the big one for me. I get that a lot. I'd never watched Peaky Blinders before writing the story that I wrote, and I certainly didn't envision that. But when people said it and I went back afterwards and watched the show, I was like, yeah, okay, I can see this, I can get behind this.
That's awesome. What about Damien or Derek? Anything to say on that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. To be honest, I'd be the exact opposite of everybody. I wouldn't be concerned even remotely when it comes to kind of what I'm reading, or if people kind of perceive some of that in my writing. When I was kind of doing the likes of Big Red, I hadn't read any type of military science fiction books before I wrote that book. I think I only started reading it maybe a month before publication. I actually read Starship Troopers, which is some of the ARC readers were telling me was very similar to, and again, it was mind blown. That maybe there's a couple of similar parts in there, but I take it more as a compliment. So if someone kind of read my kind of works and said, that reminds me of Robert Heinlein or someone else, I'd be like, that's brilliant. I love hearing that stuff. I think part of the thing I don't want to get bogged down in is because, I mean, first off, I know the story that I want to tell. Like, I know I have it already in my head. And second of all, I know who my audience are. I know what they like reading about. I know the things that they kind of enjoy reading in terms of the characters or the plot and stuff. So I'm just rolling what's in my head, and I'll literally read everything and anything I can get while I'm writing, editing. Not necessarily all the same genre. I think, like some of you have said, I'd read outside of it or whatever, but yeah, I'm not really worried when it comes to influences.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd be kind of the same as yourself, Damo. I would keep on reading, because if I stopped reading during the writing, then I'd never read anything. Because there's so few hours in the day and I can't make any more. And again, like kind of touching back on Dave's point earlier on, like Filthy Henry is a private investigator that solves magical fairy crimes in Dublin. So like there's always that allusion to, is he Harry Dresden or not? But I think I got one of the best compliments about the books before, where somebody said it was like Harry Dresden had gone on a stag party into Dublin. And it was like, well, I'll take that. Like that's not a bad one. That's a good one. That's fine.
Yeah, you don't mind stuff like that, and that's why I don't really mind. I'll read anything when I'm writing, and if I'm influenced by something, like better authors and more well-known authors than me have done it before. So like what's the bother? But when you do get those people saying that this is like that and that, it solves the job for you in a way, because you can be like, well, this is what they say it's like, and it's an easy way to advertise it. Then, yeah.
I'm happy to read a bit when I'm editing, but I tend to write in massively tight bursts. So like the whole book will be written in 4 months, but it might be written in one break and then a bit of a break for something else. And then the rest of it is in a block. So it's not continuous writing. It's kind of a solid block. And then I'll just sit down and edit it over the next few months.
That's what I used to do actually, until very recently.
Yeah, but that's why I kind of can't put anything else in, because it's literally just solid, get home from work and write, or days I'm not in my day job, just write. And yeah, if I pick up a book, I will get lost in that book and nothing will get written. Is the other side.
Yeah.
Once I start, I'm not going to put it down. And it's taking a lot of willpower not to pick up the one I'm reading at the moment, because I have to get stuff finished.
Yeah, I always think it's funny when we interview an author and they're like, oh, I've read 20 books in the past 3 months, and I'm like, how? Like with with writing and everything, like I can't even make that happen when I'm working a lot.
Ask me this again in September and you'll probably get a similar answer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's always time to read. Like I do most of my reading late at night. Yeah. So, but most of my writing I do, I'm either playing on a computer game or I'm writing in that sort of late evening or early morning. Morning's my best time. So it's like completely separate times. So there's always times to read. It's either choice between playing the new game or writing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's kind of a good segue into another question I have somewhere on this list. What's your guys's like day-to-day routine? Like I'm sure you guys have all seen like the Brandon Sanderson lectures that he does, and he talks about like his blocks of time that he uses. What is it like is it like an early morning thing for you guys, or do you like to kind of get the day started for a few hours and then go into writing?
I'd love to have the luxury of a couple of hours in the morning, because I don't know what it is. I'm very productive the earlier in the day it is. I'm just bursting with energy and ideas, but unfortunately, I've got like a full-time job. I've got loads of stuff to do in terms of that. I've got 2 young kids, so I'm up first thing with them, getting them ready for school, and then straight into work. So for me, it's maximizing what little time I have and making sure that I'm using it to the best of my ability. So for example, I get a 40-minute lunch every day. I'll write for those 40 minutes straight through. I'll do maybe about an hour writing after work, and I'll do that 5 days a week, and then the weekends maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll get an hour or 2 to myself. But I know for a fact when I have those small gaps of time, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on social media, I'm not dicking around, I'm literally just writing or editing, and it's always going to be a combination of one of those 2 things during those guaranteed blocks. And surprisingly enough, I can have a book written in about 3 months, even with those kind of small segments of time, and another 6 weeks in terms of editing. So yeah, and I've literally just nearly finished another one now, and I started that relatively recently enough. So for me, yeah, it's just maximizing it as much as you can.
Sure, efficiency.
Yeah, that's it. Because I don't have the luxury of kind of free time,
Yeah.
Obviously, especially with 2 young children, I have to be there.
For sure, yeah. Gotta be a dad.
So, yeah.
Yeah, kids does change everything, doesn't it? Like since my youngest was born, the first one was fine. I actually wrote both my books when Luna was born. Like just as soon as she was born, my wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Writing a book." She's like, I did help quite a lot though. But since the second one was born, and then I've had like loads of jobs. Like these guys know I work like ridiculously at the minute, because I have two big jobs. So I'm actually quitting my daytime job at school and just so I can get more days in the morning to write. So I'm just like saying to my boss, I'm dropping a Tuesday, I'm dropping a Wednesday, I'm dropping a Thursday. So I've got these 3 days, and I'm only working Monday and Friday, and then working all night long till like 10 o'clock, get another job. And it's just nuts. But it's just like lifestyle has totally affected things quite a lot. So I'm trying to find a new balance where I can actually get back to writing, because a few people have started to notice that it's been like 2 years since the second book came out, and I still haven't actually finished the third one yet. And they're like, "Where is it, Lee?" And I'm like, yeah. Where is it?
That's me, by the way. Every 2 months, I'm just asking, "Hey, Lee, how are you?" Book 3, eh?
It's coming. That's what I say to everyone. It is coming. Just very slowly. I have been working on it a lot recently, though, because I've got these new days for it. So.
Nice.
Fingers crossed it won't be long. I don't want to pull a George R. Martin, but I totally kind of get that.
Or a Rothfuss.
Or Rothfuss. No, it's not going to be like that. But it might take a little bit, like another year maybe. We'll see. Hopefully not. Hopefully by the end of the year, I'll try and do some take a leaf out of Damo's book and get it done in 3 months.
Fingers crossed.
We'll see.
Stop sleeping. Sleep is wasted.
I don't sleep anyway, Derek. I haven't slept really since, what day is it now? Sunday, Friday. Didn't sleep last night at all.
I was say like 2016 or something like that.
Yeah, I sleep very little. I work too much. I'm surprised I'm still alive, to be honest. I don't know how I exist at the minute. Thoughts and prayers keep me going, man.
Thoughts and prayers. Anybody else like your daily kind of routine? Anything?
I think I found, weirdly enough, that my writing routine has changed probably over the last 12 months maybe, because I always used to be very much, I would sit down and I'm very fortunate because my time is very flexible, so I can write whenever I kind of slot it into my life, But I used to sit down and I would write solidly for several hours and do that several times a week. And I would just start a book and write through to the finish. And then after it was all finished, I would go back and then start editing and correcting and, closing up loopholes and things like that. The last couple of times I've sat down to work on something, I found that I can only get to a certain point now before I have to edit. So I can maybe get about 2 to 3 chapters done at a time. And then I have to put them through several kind of read-throughs, like edits, just to make sure that I like polish everything up and then kind of pick up and carry on again. And it's been really weird to get used to, because it means that every kind of maybe 2 or 3 weeks when I start a new chapter, I'm basically starting with something that's rubbish again. It's like a constant cycle of having to polish stuff that's kind of first draft basis.
No, I do that exact same thing, actually. I write a chapter. I usually work on 2 or 3 at the same time, like completely unrelated chapters. And then as soon as I finish, I have to like go through them, maybe to get to like 3rd draft edit before I even start on the next one. I can't move on till I'm happy with it, which is a slow way of doing it, but it does work for me. But I'm exactly the same, actually. I can't just write a first draft and keep going. It's too messy. I have to stop and fix it constantly.
I'm that way as well. I work.
I am totally not.
I know.
Oh no,
I'm getting anxiety.
I sit down,
yeah.
and I work part-time. After my son was born, we made the decision that I was going to work part-time, and part of that was to stay part-time was to give me the time to write. So I have 2 days a week, which are my writing focus. But on top of that, I also, after my son's gone to bed, probably 4 or 5 nights a week, I will then write from about then and literally till my eyes close as I'm typing, which doesn't necessarily mean it's productive. But what it does mean with a glass of whiskey in hand is, my God, there are typos.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
But I will, because when I write, I feel like I'm watching it and I'm seeing it as it happens. I will literally type what I'm seeing and I just keep going. And if I go back and correct it, I will lose it completely. So I just have to keep going and keep going and keep that thread in my head and keep following it through. And it is totally unreadable. And when it goes off to my first reader, I mean, this time it took me nearly 3 weeks to make those drafts just to delete the typos. But I can't. I used to do it the other way. I flipped the other way. I used to tidy each chapter beforehand, and I found it made my whole storyline more disjointed because there were those breaks in the flow of the story. So now it's just sit down and go. But I'm better in the morning and the night. Afternoon is no good.
Yeah.
I could sit at my keyboard for 4 hours between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and I will write nothing.
Yeah.
My brain just doesn't cooperate at that point.
There was some author who posted on Twitter last night who was like, me writing at midnight. This is awesome. This is the best thing I've ever written in my entire life. And then me in the morning, was I fucking drunk?
The story's very better after a glass of wine, but the typos are 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Well, I do actually nearly have to go. I have some very pressing, top secret writer, sword fighting, horror writer engagement that I have to get to anyway. So
Right.
I have managed to put it off for a little bit.
For sure.
So I managed to hang around for a bit longer. But as promised, wait there. You wanted smoke to leave. Wait there.
Oh yeah.
I bid you adieu.
Have you guys noticed that there's it's certainly this way with like video games and probably movies too. Have you guys noticed that there's a certain time of the year that's best to put out a book onto shelves?
Well, summer's not good, but the first Tuesday of October is Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I know this because I wanted to release before BristolCon last. It was a big thing for me to have it out before BristolCon last year. Especially as I knew I was going to be on panels. I was like, I cannot turn up without my book already being out. But I was very strongly advised not to put it out on the first Tuesday because there were like 400 new releases from the trad press on those days that they'd rolled over from COVID.
Oh, remember that day actually? Yeah, yeah. And it was
I
all
was
over the
on
paper. It's
this,
like
it's
all these
always
different
Super Tuesday on
degrees.
that October, that Tuesday. But for God's sake, don't put your book out this year on that Tuesday.
It's because they want to get them all out before December, because the first
Yeah.
3 weeks of December are the worst time to release a book. Like that isn't like, you know, kind of airport fodder kind of thing.
No, it's got to
Because
have enough time to hype, isn't it? Before
yeah,
Christmas, people
and it's
go, oh
because
yeah, I want that.
yeah, and it's only because as well, the only things that people buy generally in December, book wise, is gifts for other people. So it's always like a safe kind of thing. So whether it's
Mm.
Lee Child or Jeffrey Archer or, you know, that kind of thing. So like there's a few. I don't think there's particularly a bad time to release a book other than like a good time, but there's a few specific bad times that you want to avoid at all costs.
Yeah. I mean, I've just picked these two up today from Mike
Like, yeah.
because he was doing a signing in town for my dad.
Oh, excellent.
Because
Yeah.
he absolutely loves fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at Christmas, it'd be the same. It'd be like books. That's a chunk, isn't it? Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got a proof copy of the Black Coast off him last year. Actually, I've not read it
It's
yet.
so beautiful in
Yeah.
actual the flesh. The pictures online do it no justice whatsoever. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so I'm a book buyer at Christmas as well. But you need to know that it's out there and you need to have hyped it or see it early enough. So I think I can see why December's a dead zone. And summer holidays, apparently, from friends who are booksellers, they're like, summer holidays are actually that would be the one he was talking about. Okay, yes.
I had it just in my desk.
Well, I've got those ready to wrap now they're signed. I tend to read on ebooks anyway. It's probably lucky I had them actually signed to my father, or they may not make it off my bookshelf. The fact that I had it written to him is probably the only reason they're actually going to make it to him. They're so pretty. And I nearly bought more for me, and I was like, no, you're going on holiday. Don't spend all your money on books before you go.
So this is the last question that I'll ask. I saw this, it was either on Twitter this morning or last night or something, but somebody asked if it's kind of a play on the old like deserted island question. So if you were stranded on an island, which series would you bring that you haven't read yet?
Oh,
That's a very good question. Yeah.
Oh, I know the answer to this already, so I'll go with this one. I'm always ashamed of saying that I've never read any of David Gemmel's stuff, which is like horrendous. And especially because every so often, like my Empire of Ruin series, people are like, there's a little bit like David Gemmell stuff, and I'm like, I've never read David Gemmell stuff. And it was like I'm a really big classic fantasy fan, so I used to always go into like the bookshop when fantasy used to have big sections in the UK, which they don't really as much anymore. And I'd like kind of look around and I'd see David Gemmell stuff and I'd look at the covers and I go, I know what that is, right? I'll get to that at some point in my life. And I've never gotten to it. And I feel really bad because obviously like he's dead for one. It's like I should read it at some point. And also he was so good that he named an award after him, which so like he must be good. If I knew I was going to be stranded on a desert island and I could bring a series of books with me that I hadn't read, I would bring some David Gemmell ones.
Nice.
I'm gonna have my sci-fi card rescinded here. It's gonna be The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've never read any of.
Neither have I. You're not alone.
And I know all about them and everything, but I've never had a chance to actually sit down and read them, which is disgraceful.
Yeah, no, I even remember watching the TV series, the really old BBC one, and
and
the
then
movie and stuff like that. But
I've
never,
never read them.
And I get it, like 42, I get it. I've just never read it. For me, and I don't know how this is going to go down in a conversation with fantasy writers, but I've never read a single Terry Pratchett book ever. Yeah.
I mean, the good thing with that is it would keep you busy for ages because there's so many.
Yeah, I've heard there's loads, and I've heard great things.
If I hadn't read them all, I would pick them.
No. I mean, it's like one of those things on my list. I suppose just like David Gemmell for Dave there, that I keep saying, I'll get to it one day. But yeah, if I was trapped on a desert island, probably, I think Discworld is that one of the main ones or something.
Did you
First
just
few people.
question it? That's even worse.
Yeah.
It's
One day.
something Discworld, something. I don't know.
Discworld.
Something like that.
There's
It's
a
a giant
turtle.
turtle or something, isn't it?
Yeah, here we go.
He is a giant turtle. Yeah.
I want out of this anthology, people.
Yeah, I know this'll probably get me some hate on the internet, but I've been really wary about starting any Pratchett or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I just don't know. I don't know if that's like what I'm looking for in a fantasy book, because it's mostly comedy, right? It's supposed to be most of it is like parody, I assume.
Satire.
Satire.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've just always been like, I don't know. I've just always been wary about starting it, because I don't know if I would be into like the whole goofy kind of fantasy, I think.
Okay. No, sorry, I'm gonna have to get involved here. Sorry.
Okay.
It's not
Fingers
goofy.
up.
I've heard this from people before when they talk about Pratchett in particular, and I think it's because people's idea of what Pratchett is comes from the TV adaptations a lot of the time and what they've seen and heard from those, and there hasn't yet been a single adaptation of anything that he's written that actually hits the tone of the way that he writes. So although he does write a lot of stuff that's very comedic and it is funny, it's very clever, and it is satire, but it's so relatable to real world and economics and society, and just like the way that humans interact and work and all the rules that we have. So it's actually really, really smart in the way that it's done. And I think the problem is that people think because it is funny, it's supposed to be whimsical and goofy, and it's not. When you read it, you actually get a completely different vibe. There's definitely an edge of kind of darkness and like a tone, and it's so hard to describe, and I think that's part of the problem. Until you read it, you don't really get.
Okay.
There's some really high level fantasy stuff in Pratchett's books, and like some really like high concept stuff that you'd be kind of surprised at, and really like kind of like multi-dimensional kind of really like brain spinning kind of things in there as well.
Okay.
And it's right, like the adaptations haven't even the ones that are kind of watchable are nowhere close to. The only thing that kind of comes close to it was that there was a couple of point and click PC games back in the early 90s that had Eric Idle as the voice of Rincewind. I don't know if anyone played them. And that was I don't know if Terry Pratchett was involved in these or not, but they were like the closest thing that you could get to Discworld that wasn't Terry Pratt, that wasn't like one of the books, and they were really, really great, really great things as well. I used to play them all. I think I actually played them before I read any Discworld books, actually, which would have been the thing.
I literally moved off kids' books into Truckers, Diggers and Wings and straight into Terry Pratchett. Didn't look back. And then my brother picked up my collection and carried on building it. And but it's so clever. And I think even if you read it, you can revisit it. And the more within the genre you read, and the older you get and the more aware of politics and as you say, the human observations on society, the more you see that he's hidden in it. Every little thing, every little phrase, it's all relevant. It's not fluffy humor. And I think that's part of the problem when a lot of people talk about how fantasy comedy is hard to sell. It's not because it's hard to sell, it's because he did it so well.
Yeah. I always say to people, if you want to really get the vibe of what Pratchett was about, you need to read the Sam Vine's Economic Theory of Boots, because that is, out of all the books he read, that is just the best piece of like social observation that I think I've ever read. So that's my recommendation to people, is just even if you just read that snippet, you'll read it and then just completely get it.
I saw it on Twitter, and it was very, very clever. It was written, I think it's only like a paragraph or something, but explained the lifetime of a pair of boots between if you're poor and if you're rich. And I remember reading it, I was like, gee, that's absolutely fantastic. So insightful, like very kind of clever and how it was delivered. So yeah, it's a good tip.
Nice.
Well done, Damo. Good choice. good discussion point.
Yeah.
Go heated. Go heated.
So yeah, where do you start with Pratchett? Is there I know it's kind of all over the place, isn't it?
So you
of
can start with The Color of Magic, which is the official first one. But
Oh,
my brother went a different way because he's not big into fantasy, full stop. So he started to read the Guards saga.
That's what I
as
was
they
going to
call
say.
it.
Guards is a good entry point.
Yeah,
Okay.
so because he has batches of characters that got their kind of own little sagas within the overall thing. So Death is another one that has his own kind of collection of books in it. So it depends what way you want to go. You don't need to, that's the great thing about them. You don't need to read them in order. It was around about Weird Sisters was the first one where he actually has a paragraph at the start, which basically says, look, you don't have to read these in order. However, to read this book, you need to know these bits that happened in this other book first. Other than that, though, he was kind of just like, go for a free-for-all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
All right. So going back to our desert island question. Before
I think it's just me left, isn't it? Or is it?
I'm still thinking on my
Oh, you're
answer on this
thinking-
one, to be honest.
I think, I mean, I've read a lot of the big collections. I've read a lot of if I want to read a big series, that used to be what I'd read. If I couldn't get lost in them for months, I wasn't interested in starting. But more and more, the ones that catch my eye are actually not fantasy. And I keep thinking at some point, I want to set aside some time to read Adrian Tchaikovsky's work. So that would probably be an appropriate period of time on a desert island to go off and read one of his series sets.
Yeah.
And you can talk to him about it next time we see him as well.
I know, well, that's the thing. See him in October again. Actually be able to talk to him this time and not hide in the corner because I haven't read it. Yeah.
I made him feel really old one time because I was like, I read The Shadows of the Apt when I was about 16 or 17, and he was like, Jesus Christ.
I just think, even though I just think everything I hear about it is kind of like, yeah, I think I'd really like that. So yeah, I want to make some time to set aside to do that. I'm trying to focus on indie books this summer and just on indie books for most of the summer. And then I will probably catch up on all my trad pub ones. I've caught up on all the ones that were outstanding there. But yeah, I think I'd probably go there. If it wasn't there, it'd be the bunch of Mark Lawrence ones in the middle that I haven't read. Because I've read the George ones and I've read all of the ones starting with the Book of the Ancestor and onwards. But there is a chunk in the middle that I haven't read. So
yeah, I think I would have to slightly bend the rules of the question a little bit to be able to answer, because I like to be a rebel with these things. But I think I tend to commit, like, one of the cardinal sins of reading it is that I never finish a series. Like, well, I say never, but very rarely. Like I can read the best book in the world, and I've read some fantastic ones, but I will only read the first, maybe second one in this series, and I don't know what it is about me, but I think I just see a new thing, and there's something new and shiny, and I have to have that instead.
Yeah.
So I think rather than taking a series with me, I would take the last book of every series I've ever started. So like
Nice.
Joe Abercrombie, Lightbringer, I can't think who else. I've read Sebastian de Castel. I need to finish Greatcoats. So yeah, mine would just be a vast array of final books in series.
I've got a few final books sitting at the moment. Yeah, I've got one I'm halfway through that I'm refusing to finish, because when I finish it, that means I have to finish the series and have to let go of the characters.
Yeah.
So I'm refusing to finish the book. I'm a third of the way in and I won't finish it.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, RJ. I will finish it.
Yeah, Gabe and I both need to finish the Lightbringer saga, The Expanse. I'm sure there's a couple other ones where
Lightbringer's on my last book list as well. Yeah. I got all the way to all bar the last one. Yeah. I like your answer there, Holly.
Yeah. I would love to strand Gabe on a desert island with the Lies of Locke Lamora or the Gentleman Bastards series, because I desperately need him to read those.
Yeah, there's a new one as well coming soon, isn't there? I don't think there's a date on it yet, but I think on social media he did say that he was writing a new one.
Yeah, I mean, he's been saying that for 4 years. So we'll see. I really, really hope he does, Holly. Gabe, if you were stranded on a desert island, what books would you bring that you haven't read yet?
I think I would bring the Game of Thrones series.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Because I've seen a little bit of the show, and I know it's probably doesn't compare to the books, but I feel like that would be a solid choice because it would keep me busy for a long time.
Yeah.
You know what I
Maybe
mean?
by the time you got rescued, you might have finished
Exactly. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. The boat will drive by when I'm on the last book.
Yeah.
So that, and plus I feel like I could really enjoy it if I like dedicated to some time to it, just from what I've heard and what I've read about them. So yeah.
Plus maybe he would maybe he'd put out the next book by the time you get rescued. That
Yeah,
would
you
be
can make an
awesome.
announcement that I'm lost on an island with those books, and that it
Yeah.
would be the best gift ever to have the next book when I got done.
He's going to Robert Jordan that series. Mark my words.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know, right? Who would be a good person to take that over, you think? I've heard Joe Abercrombie, and I would say, just from what I know of the guy, I think that'd probably be a good fit.
I don't know. I don't think I can see that.
No, he's
No?
way too humorous in his writing for game
Yeah.
for Something on Fire. Yeah.
Okay. What do you guys think?
I think it's a difficult one with Game of Thrones. I think because obviously when it came out, it was the whole big thing about, you know, the grimdark genre was that Game of Thrones was kind of what kicked it off, or at least certainly in terms of popularity, what kind of brought it more into the kind of public eye. So I think it's really hard to then go back and say, of all the people who have come out since then, who could emulate what was really the start of this whole subgenre. And I think as well that recent books, so you talk about Joe Abercrombie, and there's a very particular style that is a very kind of modern take on how those kind of books are written. And I think although Game of Thrones was very innovative, a lot of it's also very traditional, and it's I don't want to say it's old-fashioned, it's not old-fashioned, but there's a lot of very kind of traditional styles and tropes and things like that in it that people don't, certainly not what I read, that people don't use as much anymore. So I think that's a difficult one.
Well, what
I
about
think,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that who I would like, obviously it's never going to be my choice. I'll be like, this is, someone will come to me at one point and say, choose the next person, right? I would because of what Holly was saying, I would go with Bernard Cromwell, because
I would go Tad Williams.
Nice,
yeah, because he would
I would go
that.
with Tad Williams.
Tad Williams would be a good one as well, yeah. But I think like what you'd have to do is like you have to get someone who's got a real handle on that kind of heraldry kind of thing from like, you know, knights, because that's what it's very much based into. I mean, obviously, Song of Ice and Fire, if you take away the more fantastical elements of it, it's basically a retelling of the War of the Roses from British history, right? So you'd need to get someone who's very kind of military fiction to kind of get the same kind of tone with it. So it would be someone kind of classical that is still around, and available to write another books.
Sorry, my dog's doing loops. He does this whenever I'm on camera. He's literally going out one door in the other, and he's asking to come back in another door. My poor husband's like, why is he trying to come in this door? I don't know, that one's open. So I mean, I was reading Tad Williams at the same time as I was reading Game of Thrones. So I was reading Shadow March at the same time, which is why I said that. So they were both releasing like at the same time. And so the tone of both has certain overlaps.
Okay.
Particularly with the North. And there were points where I was like, which book's which? And if you can feel that way about which one's which when you're reading them kind of concurrently, then that's why I kind of thought he would be a good step in.
So what about
comments about heraldry?
So when Wheel of Time was getting taken over by Brandon Sanderson, what was the general like opinion of that? Like, did people think that Brandon Sanderson would be a good fit? Oh, here we go.
Didn't know who he was, and I'd bought every one of the Wheel of Time, and I didn't know who Brandon Sanderson was at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a funny time, right? Because beware, you brought a Wheel of Time, right? I do a Wheel of Time show on YouTube, and also Wheel of Time is one of my artistic hyper focus things. I know everything about it, right? I would
Okay.
not talking about it if someone started. So I was around at the time, like in the internet, kind of on all like Dragon Mountain and Fairyland and all this, which is like kind of classic Wheel of Time things. And there was just that kind of feeling that that was it when he died. You know, it was like everyone was sad, and
Yeah.
then once came to terms with the fact that he died, it was like, well, when these are never going to get finished. Like there was no real thought, and there was like a few names were getting floated, like George Martin's name was floated as coming in to finish it, and which is kind of crazy now when you kind of think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brandon Sanderson wasn't very well heard of at the time, as Jenny said. Like he did have his Mistborn books out, and he was with the same publisher. But the reason he kind of like came about it was because he wrote this really really nice kind of blog about how much he owed like his kind of writing to the Wheel of Time, and how it was kind of like such an inspiration to him. And Harriet McDougall, who was Robert Jordan's wife and editor, saw it and was like, okay, we'll ask this guy to finish the books off. And so when it was announced, it was more like relief, really, because people were like, well, at least they're going to get finished. And there was like, even to this day, there is still like, most people in the Wheel of Time fandom are very, very happy with the Brandon Sanderson books, and there's a lot of people that actually prefer them to a lot of the Robert Jordan ones. But there is a small minority that are quite vocal that hate them, and don't class any book after Knife of Dreams as being a Wheel of Time book, and say it's fan fiction and this kind of stuff. You're never going to be able to please everyone.
There was certainly a tonal shift, wasn't there? There were certain things that were toned down in his versions that were reduced, and there was certainly conversations or moments that if you'd read all the way through the rest of it, you were like, would they really have said that? It really behaved in that way, because you've read all the rest of them and you're like, hang on, that just doesn't quite. And there was a gear change that he was like, I've got to finish this in 3 books because I've got all my other books to write, and so this is going to happen, and this is the books. And there was none of that, I'm going to say it, I'm sorry, slightly bloatedness of the ones just before then.
No, definitely. And it was funny because he was a fan of the books, right? Anyway, so it was almost like it was kind of like, I know what storylines aren't popular, and I'm going to end them in the first book that I take over.
Oh, nice.
It was like boom, 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 boom. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, and it's like, let's move on. But yeah, he did a good job of trying to take on Robert Jordan's style. But as Jenny said, like there is some things like, Brandon Sanderson's books they're the most accessible high fantasy I think that you can get, and I like being like, sometimes my stuff is likened to Brandon Sanderson's, and I'm like, that's good because it's accessible, anyone can get it. But he is not as dark as Robert Jordan, who wasn't a series of its length. Like the last book is one of the best final books of a series that I've read, and he does a really great job, and it's an impossible task, and when he gets to 13 books and to try and finish something when you're not the actual writer of it who started writing the thing. But like, he did it. I think it is one of the best final books of a series that I've read, and he does a really great job, and it's an impossible task, and when he gets to 13 books and to try and finish something when you're not the actual writer of it who started writing the thing. But like, he did it. I think he did an excellent job. It'd be interesting to see if the same thing happens with A Song of Ice and Fire, because I don't know if the fan base would be as welcoming as someone else coming in to finish them off as the Wheel of Time ones was.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if at this point they're almost like, get anybody in here to finish it.
I heard something recently that's implied that part of the reason he's taking so long, amongst many, is that he has taken on board the reaction from the last episode. in the last series, and he has changed the direction of his book significantly so that he will keep the fans happier with the last book than the end of the series. So his last book is now going to diverge from the end of the TV series quite significantly.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be hard, kind of, you know, trying to make everybody happy and also trying to write the story that you want to write. And I think that is part of what is probably taking Patrick Rothfuss so long, because at this point, people have made hundreds of theories as to what that third book is. And I'm sure that some of them are right. And Patrick is probably like, well, I don't want to just write this thing that everybody has guessed already. So I'm sure he's been, you know, that's part of the reason why he's been tinkering with his final book as well. But it's got to be hard after taking, you know, after such a long time of waiting for this book and all of the kind of reactions that happen in the middle there, and trying to kind of play to those a little bit, I think. It's got to be difficult.
I think Rothfuss ones as well, like, because the way that he's structured those first two books is that everything hangs on the third one, because there's some things about Quoth where it's like, you know, is this person a nice person? Is he making all of this up? You know, and all this kind of stuff. And if it turns out that no, he's not, then it's like this character is just like a terrible, terrible character, and it's like almost like a wish fulfillment thing, because he's like, I learned 4 languages in a week, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this, right? So much kind of hangs on the whole series about how this third book, the reveal of it is, right? And it's the pressure must be absolutely enormous on it, because it's but that's the thing as well, like working on it for so long, like it's one of those things where it's like there's going to be so many people that aren't going to be happy with it regardless of what happens, because like you said, there's so many people that have been spinning theories about it for the last 11 years since the last one, that the theories are never going to be the same as what is in someone's head, but the reality of it, and people will be comparing it to the things that they've been thinking for the last decade. So Pity Lee's not here, because we could tell him to hurry up with his book so he doesn't fall into the same trap.
All right, guys. Well, I do have to wrap this up. But would you guys like to do any promotional stuff? Would you like to talk about what you're working on now, what's coming in the future, what we can look forward to?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I have 2 books out, which is the Women of Ash and Shadow and Hand That Cast the Bone. Both of them are available on Kindle and also on audiobook as well, which was narrated by RJ Bailey, who is a fantastic audiobook narrator. In terms of things I'm working on at the moment, so having obviously just wrapped up the work on Skybreaker, I'm now working on another anthology, which I'm sort of heading up kind of by default, not deliberately. It just seems to happen that way, which is a dark horror fantasy mashup with a load of different really great authors. So we're looking at bringing that out late next year. And I also have the 3rd book in the Vanguard Chronicles. It's being worked on at the moment, so I'm hoping to get that out kind of mid next year. And I have my new book which I'm working on, which features the character from my story in this anthology in a full-length novel, and I'm hoping that will either be out at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. So there's there's quite a lot going on at the minute.
Awesome.
I don't have as much going on as Holly does. That's a lot of stuff. So yeah, I just released the second in my Empire of Ruin series on Friday. So that's called Path of War. Book 1 is called In Solitude Shadow. That one is on sale at the moment. They're both on sale actually at the moment, and will be for the next week. So check those out. And in the meantime, I am working on the next book in my urban fantasy series, which is called Hell in Haven. So I'm working on the next book of that one, aiming to get that one out for probably November at the latest, if we can kind of swing it. If not, it'll be like January. And then when I finish that, I'm going to be doing the next 2 books in the Empire of Ruin series back to back to kind of get that series wrapped up by this time next year.
Nice.
So I'm currently working on Filthy Henry Nearly Christmas, and I need that to be out around about Halloween for the title to actually make sense. Otherwise, the joke won't land, and I'll have to delay it until next year. The other 4 books in the series are available on Amazon, but a good friend of mine who is a sound engineer has been making a podcast version of the first 3 books for the last couple of years. So we're currently putting that up for free up on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you just search for Filthy Henry the Fairy Detective, you can get them from there. So he does all the music and all the narration, and they go up on Sundays. So there'll be a new one up in the next hour or so.
Cool.
I will definitely check that out. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, that's me. Yeah, so I'm just, where was the signal there, Derek? No.
Yeah.
I'm just in editing the 3rd book in the Red series now at the minute, so there's nothing official. I'm not really going into too much details on it because I still haven't gotten the green light and it does need a little bit more work. And I'm about 23,000 words, I think, through the 4th book in the series. So again, nothing official at all, but just watch the space. Is all I'll say.
Sweet.
Okay. Obviously the skin is out, so my books they seem to be being described as post-apocalyptic alt future folklore seems to be where they're sitting at the moment. With fantasy, they don't fit very well. The 2nd book in that series is due out on the 1st of September at the moment, and that is The Pact. On top of that, there is a couple of projects. There's possibly a cozy fantasy about a kind of witches sports day that's in works, involving a lack of magic and trying to play magical games without magic. And then it's a case of the idea with this series was always that it was potentially going to be more like an urban fantasy series, in the sense that once the initial duology was over, there could be other books that maybe would have their individual plots or arcs within it. And so there might be a 3rd book in Black Hind's wake, or I might revisit a much bigger project called Gates. So if that appears, that is massively epic high fantasy with dragons and multiple worlds, and is definitely comes into science fantasy. So I don't know which one of those is going to happen first, but I think the cozy is probably going to be next out, just for a break while I make a decision.
Sweet. All right, guys. Well, thank you sincerely so much for joining us today and just kind of hanging out. This kind of turned into a really great just kind of hangout with all you guys, where we just kind of went all over the place and talked about whatever. It was great. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us today. And we are going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, listeners, for hanging out with us while we talk about writing with these amazing authors. I will have all their stuff linked below, so please check out their books, follow them on Twitter, and check out Skybreaker, Tales of the Wanderer, out now in ebook, paperback, and hardbook form on Kindle and Amazon. All that will also be linked below. Speaking of following amazing people on Twitter, be sure to check us out on Twitter at Files Fantasy, and do all the YouTube things like subscribing, liking, and ringing that damn bell icon to get notified when we put out new content. Right now, our content is all over the place. There are recordings from like 2 months ago that still need to get edited and published, so I'm not quite sure what's coming out next, but it's probably super exciting, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, not all who wander are lost is something that would be engraved on an old fence board in my mom's living room. Goodbye.